All right, so here we go. Quote at the top of the page here. The queen must produce some substance that attracts the workers and that can be obtained from her only by direct contact. This substance evidently stimulates the normal working behavior in the hive. This chemical messenger has been called queen substance. Experiments have shown that the bees obtain it directly from the body of the queen, from man and insects. So if these quotes are telling us about the chapters, which character do you think in this novel would be the queen? Think about that. Who would be the queen bee based on the characters that we know so far? Here we go with the rest of the chapter. The next morning inside the honey house, I woke to banging in the yard. When I pulled myself off the cot and wandered outside, I found the tallest Negro man I'd ever seen working on the truck, bent over the motor, tools scattered around his feet. June handed him wrenches and what have you, cocking her head and beaming at him. In the kitchen, May and Rosaline were working on pancake batter. I didn't like pancakes that much, but I didn't say so. I was just thankful it wasn't grits. After kneeling on 'em half your life, you don't care to eat them. The trash can was full of banana peels, and the electric percolator bubbled into the tiny glass nozzle on top of it. Bloop, bloop. I loved the way it sounded, the way it smelled. Have any of you heard of a percolator? That's probably a word you can write down for vocab, percolator. It is basically a coffee maker, but it's electric. So it's a plug-in. I guess most coffee makers now are electric. But it looks more like a kettle or a pitcher. And the coffee is made right in that pitcher, basically. So when she talks about how she loved the way it smells like coffee. Who's the man out there? I asked. That's Neil, said May. He's sweet on June. It looks to me like June is sweet on him, too. Yeah, but she won't say so, said May. She's kept that poor man strung along for years. Won't marry him, won't let him go. May drizzled batter on the griddle in the shape of a big L. This one's yours, she said. L for Lily. Rosalind set the table and warmed the honey in a bowl of hot water. I poured orange juice into the jelly glasses. Won't get married to him, I asked. She was supposed to get married to somebody else a long time ago, said May, but he didn't show up for the wedding. I looked at Rosalind, afraid this situation of jilted love might be unfortunate enough to send May into one of her episodes, but she was intent on my pancake. It struck me for the first time how odd it was that none of them were married. 3 unmarried sisters living together like this. I heard Rosalind make a sound like humph, and I knew she was thinking about her own sorry husband, wishing he hadn't shown up for their ceremony. June swore off men and said she would never get married, and then she met Neil when he came to be the new principal at her school. I don't know what happened to his wife, but he didn't have one anymore after he moved here. He has tried every which way to get June to marry him, but she won't do it. Me and August can't convince her either. A wheeze welled up from May's chest, and then out came, "Oh, Susanna, here we go." "Lord, not again," said Rosaline. "I'm sorry," May said. "I just can't help it." "Why don't you go on out to the wall?" I said, prying the spatula out of her hand. "It's okay." "Yeah," Rosaline told her. "You do what you gotta do." We watched from the screen door as May cut past June and Neil. A few minutes later, June came in with Neil behind her. I worried that his head wouldn't clear the door. "What started May off?" June wanted to know. Her eyes followed a roach that darted beneath the refrigerator. "You didn't step on a roach in front of her, did you?" "No," I said. "We didn't even see a roach." She opened the cabinet under the sink and dug into the back for a pump can of bug killer. I'd thought about explaining to her my mother's ingenious method of ridding the house of roaches, cracker crumbs, and marshmallow, but then I thought, this is June. Forget it. "Well, what upset her?" June asked. I hated to come out and say it with Neil standing right there, but Rosaline didn't have any problem with it. "She's upset you won't marry Neil." I had never considered until then that colored people could blush, or maybe it was anger that turned June's face and ears such a dark plum color. Neil laughed. "See there? You should marry me and quit upsetting your sister." "Oh, get out of here," she said, and gave him a push. "You promised me pancakes, and I'm going to have 'em," he said. He wore blue jeans and an undershirt with grease smears on it, along with horn-rimmed glasses. He looked like a very studious mechanic. He smiled at me and then Rosalind. So are you going to introduce me or keep me in the dark? I have noticed that if you look carefully at people's eyes the first 5 seconds they look at you, the truth of their feelings will shine through for just an instant before it flickers away. June's eyes turned dull and hard when she looked at me. This is Lily and Rosalind, she said. They're visiting for a while. Where do you come from? He asked me. This is the #1 most asked question in all of South Carolina. We want to know if you are one of us. If your cousin knows our cousin, if your little sister went to school with our big brother, if you go to the same Baptist church as our ex-boss, we are looking for ways our stories fit together. It was rare, though, for Negroes to ask white people where they're from, because there wasn't much to be gained from it, as their stories weren't that likely to link up. Spartanburg County, I said, having to pause and remember what I'd said earlier. And you? He said to Rosalind. She stared at the copper jello molds that hung on either side of the window over the sink. Same place as Lily. What's burning? Said June. Smoke poured off the griddle. The L-shaped pancake had burned to a crisp. June yanked the spatula from my fingers, scraped up the mess, and dropped it into the trash. How long you planning on staying? Neil asked. June stared at me, waiting, her lips pinched tight along her teeth. A while longer, I answered, looking over into the garbage can. L for Lily. I could feel the questions gathering in him, knew I could not face them. I'm not hungry, I said, and walked out the back door. Crossing the back porch, I heard Rosalind say to him, Have you registered yourself to vote? A little bit ironic, right? Because what was Rosalind doing when they were walking into town the day that she got arrested? She wanted to go register herself to vote. So even through this entire ordeal, she still hasn't given up on that idea. She's still looking forward. She still thinks that it's a good thing that she can register to vote, and those around her, all of them can register to vote. On Sunday, I thought they would go to church, but no. They held a special service in the Pink House, and people came to them. It was a group called the Daughters of Mary, which August had organized. The Daughters of Mary started showing up in the parlor before 10 a.m. First was an old woman named Queenie and her grown daughter, Violet. They were dressed alike in bright yellow skirts and white blouses, though they wore different hats at least. Next came Linnell, Maybelline, and Cressy, who wore the fanciest hats I'd ever laid eyes on. It turned out Linnell was a hat maker without the least bit of shyness. I'm talking about purple felt the size of a sombrero, with fake fruit on the back. That was Linnell's. Maybelline wore a creation of tiger fur wrapped with gold fringe, but it was Cressy who carried the day in a crimson smokestack with black netting and ostrich feathers. If this was not enough, they wore clip-on earbobs of various colored rhinestones and circles of rouge on their brown cheeks. I thought they were beautiful. In addition to all these daughters, it turned out Mary had one son beside Jesus, a man named Otis Hill with stubby teeth and an oversized navy suit. So technically, the group was the daughters and son of Mary. He'd come with his wife, who was known to everyone else as Sugar Girl. She wore a white dress, turquoise cotton gloves, and an emerald green turban on her head. August and June, hatless, gloveless, earbobless, looked practically poverty-stricken next to them. But May, good old May, had tied on a bright blue hat with the brim up on one side and down on the other. August had brought in chairs and arranged them in a semicircle facing the wooden statue of Mary. When we were all seated, she lit the candle, and June played the cello. We said the Hail Marys together, Queenie and Violet moving strings of wooden beads through their fingers. August stood up and said she was glad me and Rosalind were with them. Then she opened a Bible and read, And Mary said, Behold, from henceforth all generations shall call me blessed. For he that is mighty hath done to me great things. He hath scattered the proud. He hath put down the mighty from their seats, and exalted them of low degree. He hath filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he hath sent empty away. Laying the Bible in her chair, she said, It's been a while since we've told the story of Our Lady of Chains, and since we have visitors who've never heard the story of our statue, I thought we'd tell it again. One thing I was starting to understand was that August loved to tell a good story. Really, it's good for all of us to hear it again, she said. Stories have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who they are or why we're here. Cressy nodded, making the ostrich feathers wave through the air so you had the impression of a real bird in the room. That's right, she said. Tell the story, she said. August pulled her chair close to the statue of Black Mary and sat facing us. When she began, it didn't sound like August talking at all, but like somebody talking through her, someone from another time and place. All the while, her eyes looked off toward the window like she was seeing the drama play out in the sky. Well, she said, back in the time of slaves, when the people were beaten down and kept like property, they prayed every day and every night for deliverance. Deliverance, write that down as your vocab word. On the islands near Charleston, they would go to the praise house and sing and pray, and every single time someone would ask the Lord to send them rescue, to send them consolation, to send them freedom. Consolation, another vocab word. I could tell she had repeated those opening lines 1,000 times, that she was saying them the exact way she'd heard them coming from the lips of some old woman who'd heard them from the lips of an even older one, the way they came out like a song with rhythms that rocked us to and fro till we had left the premises and were ourselves on the islands of Charleston looking for rescue. One day, August said, a slave named Obadiah was loading bricks onto a boat that would sail down the Ashley River when he saw something washed up on the bank. Coming closer, he saw it was the wooden figure of a woman. Her body was growing out of a block of wood, a black woman with her arm lifted out and her fist balled up. At this point, August stood up and struck the pose herself. She looked just like the statue standing there, her right arm raised and her hand clutched into a fist. She stayed like that for a few seconds while we sat, spellbound. Obadiah pulled the figure out of the water, she went on, and struggled to set her upright. Then he remembered how they'd asked the Lord to send them rescue, to send them consolation, to send them freedom. Obadiah knew the Lord had sent this figure, but he didn't know who she was. He knelt down in the marsh mud before her, and he heard her voice speak plain as day in his heart. She said, "It's all right. I'm here. I'll be taking care of you now." This story was 10 times better than Beatrix the Nun. August glided back and forth across the room as she spoke. Obadiah tried to pick up the waterlogged woman who God had sent to take care of them, but she was too heavy, so he went and got 2 more slaves, and between them they carried her to the praise house and set her on the hearth. By the time next Sunday came, everyone had heard about the statue washing up from the river, how it had spoken to Obadiah. The praise house was filled with people, spilling out the door and sitting on window ledges. Obadiah told them he knew the Lord God had sent her, but he didn't know who she was. "He didn't know who she was!" cried Sugar Girl, breaking into the story. Then all the daughters of Mary broke loose, saying over and over, "Not one of them knew!" I looked over at Rosalind, who I hardly recognized for the way she leaned forward in her chair, chanting along with them. When everything had quieted down, August said, "Now the oldest of the slaves was a woman named Pearl. She walked with a stick, and when she spoke, everyone listened. She got to her feet and said, 'This here is the mother of Jesus.' Everyone knew the mother of Jesus was named Mary, and that she'd seen suffering of every kind, that she was strong and constant and had a mother's heart. And here she was, sent to them on the same waters that had brought them here in chains. It seemed to them that she knew everything they suffered." I stared at the statue, feeling the fractured place in my heart. We'll stop there. We'll continue. Make sure you continue on the second part of chapter 6, okay?